Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to celebrate my 200th episode. And yeah, I can't believe it's been 200 episodes of this. I didn't think I'd actually keep this going for this long since I started it in the pandemic. But yeah, thanks for listening and following along all this time. And so yeah, for this episode, I'm going to be doing a ranking list of my favorite jokes and gags from the entire series. And yeah, this is basically anything that made me laugh or I found incredibly humorous throughout the series. Of course, this is completely subjective and everyone will have their own list. So I'd also love to eventually hear some of your favorite funny moments from the series as well. And also just a fair bit of spoiler warning, I will be covering most of the entire series thus far, but my rankings only talk about up to anime episode 1016 and manga chapter 1001. Which would put it during the third act of the Wano arc. But if you want to skip those, I will warn you which ones take place at what point in the series. So if you want to skip a specific one based on the chapter or episode number that you're on, feel free to do that as well. Some of these will be like combination ones that they play off of each other really well, and you'll realize which ones those are because I'll talk about two specific moments, but they kind of comprise an entire gag. So that's kind of why I wanted to throw the gag part into it as well, not just specific jokes or scenes. And originally, I was going to only put 20 moments that I had with honorable mentions, but there was one that I wanted to talk about specifically, so I actually included the 21st moment as well. And so, since it's my list, I get to do whatever I want with it. So this will be 21 specific moments that I really enjoy throughout the series. All right, so starting off at number 21, the one that I really wanted to include and make sure that it was on this list comes to us from chapter 149 and episode 88 during the Drum Island arc. And it's the moment where Luffy gets excited for Chopper to shoot a beam when he first uses Brain Point and Scope. And this scene is so funny because, first of all, the fact that like it's a very serious moment where it's like Chopper's moment to be the hero of the arc and take down the Chess Kuromarimo villain. And Luffy's just standing there. He takes this big gulp and then he's like, "It's a beam. It's like a beam. It's a beam is coming." And then Sanji's like it would. And then they just get into this argument. It's like, it's a beam. And then the part that really gets me is Sanji goes, "What kind of beam?" It's just like this ridiculous back and forth between the two of them while Chopper's having this intense fight. And I think this is one of my favorite like comedy style of early One Piece, you know, where you get like the East Blue Saga and the Arabasta Saga, where you have these like ridiculous moments. And I think the way Sanji's voice actor, Hiroki Hirata, delivers that line, "Donna beam da," is so funny. And so, yeah, that's why that's number 21 on my list. And I had to throw it on there because I laugh so hard every time I hear them bicker about the beam. And then this is also kind of where the whole beam running joke starts too, where they all get excited whenever a beam starts to show up or the possibility of a beam comes out at any point in the series, even to this point where we have some of the newest episodes. They always still get excited whenever a beam is teased. Okay, so moment number 20 comes to us from chapters 283 and 284 and episode 185 during the Skypiea arc. And this is the moment where Usopp and Nami are trying to survive Enel on the Maxim. And this moment has so many funny scenes right from the get-go when Usopp just like slams Enel's face with the exploding star. And then he's like, "I'm sorry." Gomenasai. And then he realizes that Sanji isn't there yet. And so he's just kind of like, there's this long silence. And I love how this entire scene uses these long pauses of nothing to sort of accentuate the jokes. And he just stands there contemplating his decisions. And then he just says, "Dewa," or "bye," and then closes the door. And Nami's like, "Kora!" And then he has this moment of like reflection. And he's like, he comes out of the door all ready to fight again, you know, building up courage to help Nami. He's like, "So what if you're a god?" And then Enel just strikes him with lightning. And then he's just like, "Ah!" He screams and runs. And then the other funny part is when he then gets on the side of Nami and he's like, "Nami, And Nami is like, what do you need me to do? And he's like, help me. And then Nami's just like, wait. And then the final scene, and I love this is like one of the core bonding moments between Nami and Usopp, is that they're both kind of like standing there, kneeled down on the ground. It's like, yeah, but what do you expect me to do? It's a god. And then they're like, ah, and they're just like laughing all casually. And then they both get struck by lightning and they have to jump out of the way. And this entire scene is so funny because of the fact that like it's Nami and Usopp really together, and both of them being weaklings, and the fact that like I said, the silences in this episode are just so funny how they use that. It's just like these long extended pauses that really make every time Usopp or Nami say something incredibly funny. All right, number 19 comes to us from chapter 473 and episode 368 during the Thriller Bark arc, and it's Robin's refusal to join the Tactics 15. Um, this is probably needs no explanation really why it's so funny, because the whole sequence of them basically doing the Power Rangers and Voltron combination is hilarious on its own. But then obviously Robin's refusal to join, and then her reasoning is the fact that she's like, as a human, it makes me embarrassed. I think what really though, that part's funny, but what really tops it off for me is the moment at the end with Zoro, where he's like, after they're all attacked, and he comes to his senses. It's like, what did I just do? Because it's like even Zoro's facial reactions during the combination sequence he's got this like blank like stare of almost like, what am I doing right now? And then he voices that actual thought after the end, when he's like finally comes to his senses when the attack fails and they're all kind of separated out. All right, number 18. So this one's probably not going to be on a lot of people's lists, but it's always been a personal favorite of mine. So this comes to us from chapter 2, episode 1. And it's the moment where Luffy and Kobe meet, and Luffy just mocks Kobe for his his sort of lack of confidence. And I think the thing that really gets me, and I've talked about this many times on the podcast as well, is when Kobe is talking to Luffy, and he's basically saying how he got trapped on Arabia's ship and why he won't ever go for his dreams. And he's like, Moody, 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 Moody. And after Luffy calls him dumb and clumsy, he asks Kobe, like, why don't you ever try and leave? And he's like, I can't do it. Luffy's response is, man, on top of that, you're also a coward. Man, I really hate people like you. It's so funny because he says this with the biggest smile, too. It's like, it doesn't seem to come from a place of malice, but the fact that he's so sincere and honest about that is so funny. And this moment will always be hilarious to me, and why I think one of the reasons why I attached to Kobe so early on, and why he to this day still remains as one of my favorite characters, is probably this scene. All right, so number 17, this is one that's probably on a lot of people's lists because it's like world famous among the One Piece community. And it's not even a canon moment. But it's so good that I had to put it on here. So number 17 comes from episode 200, and this comes from the G8 filler arc, and that is the Condoriano moment. So this happens about partway through that, I think, 8-episode arc, where Usopp and Zoro are already imprisoned in a cage, and Robin has basically impersonated Shepard, who's this Marine officer that comes to the base. And so Shepard gets thrown into the cell with them, thinking that he's part of the pirates. And so in order to keep Robin's cover up, Usopp basically makes up this weird name, Condoriano, and then starts to talk to him as if he's one of their crew members to keep Robin's cover intact. And this whole exchange is freaking hilarious because Usopp goes into this like crazy character where he's like, come on, man, Condoriano, it's like, you're one of us. And the fact that Zoro gets in on this is even hilarious too. But yeah, overall, this moment is absolutely gold for a filler moment, and it's easily one of the best filler moments. Next, at number 16, from chapters 731 through 736 and episodes 663 through 668, which takes place during the Dressrosa arc. And this is more of a gag that basically runs throughout the middle act of Dressrosa, and that is the disguises of Kinemon, Zoro, and Luffy. Now, these disguises, the frog cat and the koi fish disguises, are just absolutely hilarious. So when they first show up, it comes after this like incredibly dramatic moment of Luffy freaking out over discovering that Sabo is still alive. But they're running around in these like ridiculous mascot costumes. And I think what sells it for me is the fact that the whole time their expressions are completely emotionless, like especially Zoro with the cat. The cat disguise is so amazing. And you hear these voices come out of, because they're pretty animated voices. Zoro is obviously a little bit more subdued, but Kinemon and Luffy are incredibly animated, but the faces of the mascot costumes are completely emotionless. Of course, Luffy's head pops out from the mouth quite often, but the whole thing is just hilarious. And I love how in the anime there is an added scene where Zoro gets like lost a bit, and he has to like basically play with these kids for a little bit, but then one of them wants to play with his swords and he just like kind of pushes them away. The whole city freaks out because they think they're kids or they're toys that are pushing back against the humans. And the whole thing is just hilarious because it happens in these incredibly dramatic moments where they're trying to break into the castle in the center of Dressrosa to try and infiltrate and save Law, and they're doing it in these most ridiculous disguises ever. And that's what makes this moment or gag really funny on my list. Okay, so number 15 on my list, this is actually two moments, but it's basically one long gag, and it's actually a long game too. So these come from chapters 435 and 436, as well as 494 and 495, and then episodes 320 and 338 and 339. And that this takes place kind of towards the end of Water 7 and in between Subody. And that is, of course, the Sanji's wanted poster as well as Duval's face reveal. So these two moments, both on their own, are really funny. Like Sanji's wanted poster is absolutely ridiculous. And I almost did a spit take the first time I read that page. But his reaction to it, and then the whole sequence where he's like just yelling gibberish, and even the subtitles are nothing but like random characters. And Zoro's like, speak clearly. And then the cherry on top is later on, this gets paid off. Obviously, several episodes and several chapters later, we get to see the payoff to this in the most hilarious fashion with a person who actually looks like the face that they drew on Sanji's wanted poster. Duval's is so sad too. And then there's the whole thing where Sanji just gets absurdly pissed off. And then he's like, you could have done so many things to change your situation, like change your hair, change your face, like put it on something else. And Duval's like, oh, that's right, I could have done that. And it's so, yeah, this scene is so funny. And then I think one of my favorite moments from this scene that really pushes it over the edge is Brook's reaction, because he just joined the crew. And he's like on the floor laughing his ass off, and even Sanji's like, you're laughing too much, Brook. And so yeah, this scene is definitely high up there in my list because it just makes me laugh every time I see it. Number 14. Now, this one may not be on as many people's lists, but this comes from chapter 123 and episode 75, which takes place during the Little Garden arc. And it's essentially the entire interaction with Zoro on the candle service set when they're all trapped with Bibi, Nami, and Zoro are stuck inside the candle service set and they're about to be turned into wax. And the whole thing with Zoro trying to cut his legs off, and then I think what really always sends me over the top is the whole conversation with Zoro and picking his pose as he's about to die. and Nami just like being exasperated at the fact that Zoro isn't really taking this seriously. But then it's just funny seeing Vivi's reaction to it too, and seeing how like they're completely not concerned about their current situation, even though they're close to dying. And then there's the sort of the added joke of Miss Golden Week telling Mr. Three that the three of them aren't really taking this seriously, all while kind of like her sitting down on the picnic blanket and sipping tea, and Mr. Three going, "You're also not taking this very seriously either, Miss Golden Week." I really hope that they keep this a version of this moment in the live action because it's so good. Now, number 13 will definitely need no introduction. It is one of the most famous memes from One Piece, and it comes to us from chapter 279 and episode 182 during the Skypiea arc, and that is when NL realizes that his powers are ineffective against Luffy on the Arc Maxim. And yeah, this scene I don't really need to talk about. Just Luffy's facial expressions after taking several shots of, NL's ultimate attacks, basically, and he just is unfazed. And then, of course, NL's epic reaction. And I love that there's like no other sound. It's literally just him with his mouth agape and just absolutely stunned that Luffy cannot be hurt by his lightning. And yeah, the meme speaks for itself. This scene is just amazing. At number 12, we have one that I've been talking about pretty recently in the actual Rewatch podcast. And that comes to us from chapter 633 and episodes 553. That's kind of the Gags debut, but it kind of runs throughout the entirety of the Fishman Island arc. And that is anything involving Megalo. So Megalo is funny on his own because of the fact that he has this like weird facial expressions of like always being in shock. But really where the comedy comes from is whenever something gets stuffed inside of his mouth, particularly when Shirahoshi is stuffed inside of his mouth and she's hiding in him. And especially when they get towards the Coral Hill area and he's like can't hang on anymore, and you see just tears just running down his eyes. And then, of course, the epic moment when Luffy busts out of him right before saving everyone from Hody. It's just the poor guy's face is what really sells it for me. That anytime I see Megalo just struggling with those tears like streaming down his eyes, it's so funny and I can't help but laugh. Pretty much anytime Megalo's on screen, I am always giggling. At number 11, this is another one of my all-time favorite moments. It's a really simple one, and I've talked about it quite a bit in throughout the rewatch episodes, but it comes from chapters 248, episode 162 during the Skypiea arc, and it's when Chopper is guarding the Going Merry, and he freaks out and blows the whistle at the sight of Shura. I think really just this whole scene is just how the anime does it. The manga does this really well, and I talked about this in the podcast, but the way it's done in the anime, how it does it 3 times where he flips around and looks at the camera and has his face just completely blown up with his eyes bulging out and his cheeks just ready to blow the biggest whistle at the sight of Shura is so funny. And I will never get over seeing that. And the way it's handled in the anime is just magnificent. It's so perfect. Okay, so now we're getting into the top 10. And these are some of my absolute favorite comedy moments in One Piece. And at number 10, it comes to us from chapter 170, episode 106. However, this basically happens throughout the entire series, particularly more towards the pre-time skip era. But it's whenever Luffy is imitating one of his crew members, especially Sanji. So the very first time he does this, when they're trapped inside the cage in Crocodile's lair, they have nothing to do, and the scene just all of a sudden cuts to Luffy entertaining Usopp with an imitation of Sanji. He's like, "Niku kutta no mai ka." Did you eat the meat? And it's so perfect. And then again in Skypiea, while Usopp and Luffy and Sanji are in the ordeal of balls and they're floating through the Cloud River, And then he imitates Sanji again, where he's like, Koi no Shiren, or like the trials of love. It's just so funny the way Tanaka Mayumi does that impression of him. And then also, of course, he's done impressions of Zoro and Robin and Chopper, and all of them are gold. And I love anytime Luffy tries to imitate one of his nakama. It's so funny. At number 9, we have from chapter 45 and episode 21, pretty early on in the series, from the Baratier arc. And this is Luffy as a chore boy. And particularly the moment where Luffy is, quote, washing the dishes on the Baratier. Like, this whole thing where he starts washing the dishes and Patty and Carne are talking about Gin and all of that. And they're talking about a pretty serious thing where, you know, whether it was a good idea of beating up Gin and running him out. And then you hear in the background just like dishes breaking over and over and over. And then finally Patty is like, how many dishes have you broke? And Luffy's like, oh, sorry, I haven't been counting. And then later on, he's like, they tell him to do other stuff, and he just completely messes everything up. And he like steals food from the prepared dishes, and then he's just like making a mess of everything. And this whole scene of him being a chore boy is funny. And then on top of that, when he gets to the table and he's told to just go wait on the tables, and then the whole interaction with Zoro and Usopp at the table, especially where he tries to put his boogers in Zoro's water. And tries to get him to drink it, and then Zoro just like immediately figures it out and just tries to stuff it down Luffy's throat. This entire scene is so funny. Oh, I love it. Yeah, early One Piece's comedy is just gold. So moments 8 and 7 are actually very similar, and once you hear what 8 is, you'll figure out what 7 is. But number 8 comes to us from chapter 742, episode 667, during the Dressrosa arc yet again. And this is the moment where Usopp beats Sugar and then also becomes God Usopp. This scene is so amazing because you'd think you wouldn't be able to top what will come in 7. But the fact that like the way Usopp beats Sugar, like the plan goes to shit and everything looks terrible, and it looks like Sugar is about to turn Usopp into a toy as well. But in order to like kind of stick it to him, she puts his like super Tabasco star in his mouth, and then the face that Usopp makes is so damn funny. And then the fact that beats Sugar, of all characters, like one of the most terrifying characters in the entire series, and just knocks her out. And then this elevates Usopp to the status of God Usopp among all the prisoners of Dressrosa. And how he's held up by Hayden as this like Christ-like figure is ridiculous and so funny. Oh man, I love that scene. I can't wait to talk about it once we get to Dressrosa. And of course, by the way I talked about number 8, you can probably guess what number 7 is, and that comes from chapter 461, episode 356 during the Thriller Bark arc. And this is when Usopp beats Perona by being negative all the time. And then this is another really like surprising moment where you're kind of caught off guard at just the genius of it, but also the absurdity in it. Because you'd think Usopp has no shot at beating Perona, and like she is taking down everyone with her negative hollows. But then when the negative hollows run through Usopp, it does nothing. And the way he just confidently declares, it's because I'm always negative. And then Perona's reaction, I think, is what really makes this moment so good, is that she's of course freaked out at first, but then she has pity on Usopp. It's like the way she starts chanting, "Gambare, gambare," like keep trying. It's so funny and yet so sad. I love Usopp's moments. Like, Oda doesn't give Usopp too many great moments throughout the series, but man, when he does, he gets some of the best ones. In at number 6, and this is probably the most furthest along in the story as far as like moments go, and it comes to us from chapter 1001, episode 1016 during the Wano arc in the 3rd act. And this is the moment where we have the game of chicken between Kid, Law, and Luffy on Onigashima. And I don't know where this came out of nowhere, to be quite honest. Like, this scene is so funny because of how competitive they are, and their faces is what really gets me. Like, Oda is so good at drawing these ridiculous faces, but as the fireballs are getting closer and closer to each one of them, the way they like scrunch their faces in, and like you could easily see Luffy making this kind of face, but the fact that like the ultra like serious Kid and Law, particularly Kid, because you'd never expect to see Kid in this because he's more laid out as like this very like hard edged, almost kind of like evil looking character. Like Law, you can kind of see because he's kind of gotten used to the whole Straw Hat dynamic. But seeing all three of them make this ridiculous face as they're scrunching their faces in to avoid the fireball, but ultimately getting nailed by each one of them, is this scene. It comes out of nowhere and it's so funny because it's such a serious moment because they're fighting both two emperors at the same time, and yet they're pulling dumb shit like this at the same time. It's just so funny. Okay, so number 5 will probably be quite a surprise to a lot of people at how high it is on the list. And this is just one of my personal favorite moments, and it's never left me. I think about this scene quite often. It's like sometimes if I'm in a bad mood or I'm in kind of like a sad moment, I think about this scene because of just how funny it is. And there's also kind of a bonus moment too. So this comes to us from chapter 134, episode 80 during the Drum Island arc. And it's the moment where Sanji kicks the Leopard cub. And so this moment, you know, they're carrying Nami, who's sick, up to Dr. Kureha and Chopper, and they're running through the snowy mountain area, and you see this crazy looking vampiric rabbit cub, the Lapon. It's just constantly like lunging at them, trying to attack them, and they're just completely it almost seems like they're completely unaware of this as they're like dodging while having a very casual conversation about nothing really. And then towards the end of it, this is after like several minutes of this too, so she just all of a sudden stops mid-conversation and says, "Saki kara uttoshin da yo!" and just Hail Mary kicks the hell out of this thing way off screen. And it's so funny because it comes out of nowhere. And then the other little bonus thing I wanted to add on while we're talking about Drum and random animals is the running gag of the hiking bear. I didn't feel like I wanted to give this its own specific moment, but I feel like it's related enough. But the hiking bear is also a really funny thing that keeps appearing as it just walks by and they all bow to it. And it's so random, but it's so funny for some reason. I don't know what it is, but I love the hiking bear. All right, so number 4. Now we're getting into like some of my all-time favorite moments in general. And this comes to us from chapter 668, episode 594, during the Punk Hazard arc. And I'm pretty sure you can all guess which one this is if you've seen these episodes. Is the whole scene where Law and the Straw Hats form their alliance. And obviously, it's not just the moment where they form the alliance, and Robin has that funny moment where she cautions Luffy against forming alliances and pirates, and Luffy just turns to him and is like, "Are you going to betray me?" He's like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, okay." That moment's funny, but everything leading up to that is insanely funny, particularly when Chopper gets strapped to Law's head because Chopper needs to accompany Law to take on, Caesar and all that stuff. And Law's face is really funny, but really the reason why this moment is on the list is because of the Ope Ope no Mi body switching, particularly with Frankie and Chopper, with Frankie inside Chopper's body, and Robin absolutely hating it because she loves all things cute and furry and stuff like that. And seeing Frankie make these absurd faces in Chopper, especially when he's like, "Oi, oi, homie, go to chica." It's like, hey, are you overpraising me? And Robin's like, "Frankie, don't ever make that face again with Chopper's body." And then it happens several more times, and each moment is just as funny. And yeah, seeing Frankie, and I mean also seeing all the other characters inside each other's bodies too is pretty funny too. Like Nami going like, I don't want to be a hentai anymore. Like all of that is funny. And then obviously there's the crazy stuff with Sanji inside Nami's body, which I don't know is okay. But yeah, this scene is absolutely gut busting. It's so funny, both in the manga and in the anime. I think the anime obviously is superior just because you get to hear the voice acting, particularly from Kazuki Yao, who plays Frankie. All right, so number three. Now we're into the top three, and number three is easily one of my favorite moments in all of One Piece because it. First off, it comes at post time skip, so it was really cool to see this funny of a scene appear this late in the series. But in chapter 803, episode 752, during the Zou arc, we get the Ryunosuke moment. Now, Ryunosuke, this whole sequence is so insanely funny. Of course, Ryunosuke is struggling to get them all up Zou, or Zunisha to get to Zou. And it's struggling, but the real comedy begins when they finally make it to the top and Ryunosuke is starting to fade away. And they're all freaking out like, oh, Ryunosuke. And then, of course, Robin just being, I don't know, it takes you by surprise seeing Robin so emotional because of how cute she finds Ryunosuke. And she even gives him flowers as he fades away. And then the other guy's like screaming, Ryunosuke. But really, the kicker is when the music just cuts off and it even cuts Usopp off yelling and, tears streaming down his face. with Law and Zoro, especially Law going, Chabanda. And then Zoro going, Tada no heta na e daro. It's like, this is absurd. That was just a ridiculously badly drawn picture. And everyone getting pissed off at the two of them because of how heartless they are. And then you see like Ryunosuke's portrait in the sky and he's like, no. It's so stupid, but it's so funny. Oh man, I love this moment to death. It's so good. All right, number two. Now, if you've been paying attention to my podcast, you probably know what 1 and 2 are. But number two comes to us from chapter 102, episode 62, during the Twin Capes arc, or the beginning of the Grand Line, and it is Crocus's intro. This moment will forever be insanely funny to me because I come back to this moment every so often just to watch this scene because of how funny it is. It's so stupid too, and it's an actual gag. Even the characters in the show recognize that it's a gag, and it's the whole repeating gag of where he sits down and it goes don don don, and the dialogue here is so funny too. Like especially Crocus comes off as this incredibly intimidating guy, and all of his answers are just these like ridiculously smart ass answers. Like Usopp saying, we're gonna shoot a cannon at you, and then Crocus, all intimidating, is like, you better not, someone will die. And Sanji's like, oh, who's gonna die? Me. It's like, oh my god, are you? And then of course the whole thing with Zoro introducing himself, and then Crocus saying like it's more polite to introduce yourself first before you ask someone else's name. And Zoro starts talking and introduces himself, but at the same time Crocus then goes into his introduction as well, and Zoro's just like, can I cut this guy? And I think it's just a combination of just how kind of almost surreal and absurdist and almost fourth wall breaking this joke is, as well as just seeing Zoro and Sanji completely outmatched in terms of Crocus's ridiculousness. And this scene will always be funny. And the fact that like Crocus even tries to play it off as a gag, and then this is like, you guys can't appreciate a good gag? It's like, and they even say, this is a gag? Again, I hope they at least like, I know they can't do this in the live action because of how ridiculous it is, but I hope they kind of homage this scene a little bit somehow. Maybe do it once and have like the camera like close in on Crocus's face from different angles. I think that would be it. That would be my dream and wish. Like I don't necessarily need them to go full on into this moment as a joke, in the live action, but I hope to God that they at least pay homage to this joke because it's so good. So, before we get to number one, I just wanted to do a couple honorable mentions or several honorable mentions because, I mean, in reality, there was so many moments I could have picked. And there are a lot of moments that I wish I could have like brought up and talked about a little bit more, but I'll list a few of the ones that I left off, but I kind of wanted to put on. So the first one is Chopper giving Frankie the wrong drinks against Fukuro on NES lobby. That one, I mean, that moment is so funny seeing him just hop between different personalities. Bartolomeo fanboying over Luffy and the Straw Hats. Anytime Bartolomeo is fanboying over the Straw Hats is hilarious. Similarly, in Skypiea, when Luffy is fighting NL, when he does the Gomu Gomu no Bong, where he tries to clear his mind out, and that face he makes is so funny, as he's just like mindlessly avoiding NL's attacks, but then he's not able to attack himself. Another moment that I wish I could put on here is the Luffy's magic trick of instant eating at the end of Arabasta. Like, I think for me, that moment is really Zoro and Sanji's reaction. He's like, is that a magic trick? Another moment that I wish I could have put on was from Thriller Bark, where Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy have had their shadows taken, and Usopp's method of getting them wake up is to yell at them, a hot swordswoman with meat is here. And then that gets them all up. Brook's entire introduction is also worth a mention as well. Sogeking's intro as well. Kinemon lucking into the plan working before the raid on Onigashima is also another genius moment. I love that moment. Zoro fighting Braham in Skypiea and playing off like his goggles or sunglasses is another joke that I really enjoy. Similarly, in Skypiea, Zoro, when he screams ah, does the Tarzan scream as he's swinging. That's another really cool moment that I love. Luffy singing his Aho Baka song in the upper yard during Skypiea. Skypiea has so many funny moments. And then, of course, Luffy casually apologizing to Morgan for breaking his statue in the second episode. That's another really funny moment I love. Of course, Mini Buggy is funny as well in all of his adventures. Anytime Luffy messes up Itarari Tsukuseri, that line is also really funny to me. And then finally, again from Drum, is Usopp and Vivi getting buried in the avalanche, and then her pulling Usopp out by his nose and then just slapping the hell out of him so that his face gets insanely swelled up. And then Zoro coming out of nowhere and then not recognizing Usopp at first, and then he notices the nose and he's like, "Oh, Usopp!" And so those are probably worth mentioning. I feel like honorable mentions, but. Now let's get into number one. So number one, I'm sure everyone knows what my favorite moment is, and this is probably a lot of people's one of their favorite moments, and that is in chapter 448, episode 342 from the Thriller Bark arc, Luffy pushing down the zombie. Now this moment is legendary. I don't know why it's so funny, to be honest, but just how blankly everyone stares at the zombie coming out of the ground, and you'd think you'd be like freaked out about this, but they all four of them, or no, there are five of them, Luffy, Sanji, Zoro, Frankie, and Robin, all just kind of like stare at them, and then Luffy especially, he just kind of like drops his bug net and slowly walks over to this zombie, and then the way he like gently pushes him down, and how Luffy says yosh yosh yosh, like there, and just like slowly pushes him back down into the ground. and then the way he pops out is like I would ever do that. And then the fact that Luffy then immediately thinks, oh, this is a really gravely injured old man. And everyone behind him is like, that's clearly a zombie. And then the fact that they reverse that gag later on when they meet that old man. This whole joke is so good. I freaking love the zombie joke. But there you have it. My top favorite running gags and jokes throughout the series of One Piece. I know this was kind of a weird, disjointed episode. Most of it was actually unscripted. It was just me rambling about my favorite funny moments. But I thank you for indulging me. And yeah, I thank you for following me and supporting me for 200 episodes now. And Yeah, hopefully I'll keep going. I know things are getting a little busy for me, but yeah, I really enjoy doing this podcast and enjoy, interacting with you all who have, kindly reached out and given me positive words and great reviews. I know I don't have very many reviews, but the reviews that I've gotten are very kind, and so I'm really grateful for that. And thank you so much for everyone's support and listening. And yeah, let's hope to another 200 episodes, I guess. I hope it doesn't take that much longer, but I'm already at what, 500, and there's more than 1100 episodes. So yeah, there's still a lot to go. And yeah, I hope to keep going for as long as I can. And thank you. So yeah, next week we'll get back to the rewatches and the finishing up of the Fishman Island arc as well. So look forward to that. But if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast. If I ever post again, hopefully I will. And yeah, as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to listen to the podcast, and stay safe out there. And I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.